My clients and students often ask, why have a method for having a critical leadership conversation? That's a good question. But when I answer it, I first answer three more specific questions. The first question I answer is, what's the difference between being comfortable at having these conversations and being effective at having them? You see, someone can be comfortable at having the 5 critical leadership conversations and still not be effective at having them. And it's perfectly normal to always be just a little uncomfortable, no matter how effective you are. As a matter of fact, it might even be better if you're always just a little uncomfortable at having these conversations. Here's why. You are a leader and an expert in your organization. What you say has an impact. People will change what they do or what they think based on what you say. Now, it's normal to think that in a particular instance, what you said did not have an impact, but that's not really true. You see, if you were trying to influence someone and they did not take your advice, then the impact you had was to enable them to continue along their original course. When you enter into each of these 5 critical leadership conversations, that awareness of your impact should rightfully be the source of some discomfort. But that discomfort should also motivate you to have the best conversation possible. The second question I answer is, why follow a specific method for having any kind of conversation? Most of us think that our conversation should be spontaneous, free-flowing, and natural. That's actually the kind of conversations I prefer, and I'm sure you also prefer those conversations. The problem is that even though we might feel constrained by some structure, the absence of structure doesn't always serve the other person. Another way to say this is that structure often helps others understand us. Carl Jung, one of the early pioneers in psychology, said, "If we don't understand someone, we tend to regard them as a fool." Now, I know that quote from Carl Jung is not true all the time, but the more we are understood, the more credibility we're likely to have, and the more impact we may have on others. Having some structure supports that understanding, credibility, and impact. The third question I answer is, why have the same method or structure for all 5 critical leadership conversations? As I mentioned earlier, leadership is a lot more than having these 5 conversations. We also know that leadership takes time, and because our time is always limited, we have to make the most of our time to lead. So the answer to the question, why have a method to have a critical leadership conversation, is because it'll make you more comfortable and effective at having the conversation, because it'll help others understand you, and because it'll save you time. And that last reason, saving time, has become so important since many of us have begun working remotely or at home in a virtual workplace. In 2020, most of our working lives changed. Many people began working from home or working remotely and had to engage with their teams and colleagues through video conferencing. But something else changed too. I began to see a change in the type of leadership development support that my clients were asking for. My clients were not overwhelmed in general by the amount of time they spent on video calls. Instead, they were overwhelmed specifically with the amount of time it took to have the 5 critical leadership conversations that we talk about in this course. On video, the conversations were taking longer and they weren't going very well. The conversations felt awkward and my clients were beginning to avoid them. Remember what I said during the introduction to this course, that avoiding these conversations almost always has a negative impact. Following the 5-step method that we'll discuss next enabled my clients to be more comfortable, more effective, and make the best use of their limited time to lead. One last question I get asked is, does the method change if you're having the conversation online or in person? The answer is no. The method stays the same. But if you are having these conversations over a video call or telephone, then you'll need to follow some of the best practices for engaging with people online. And we've included a couple of those in the checklist that you'll find in your course guide. So now that we know why having a method is so helpful, let's look at the 5-step method itself in the next module. I'll see you there.